Okay, let's try. And my head's cut off. Wait 1 minute, I'm gonna move the camera. Why is this cut off? Okay. For some reason, my head gets being cut off. Okay, that's better. Yeah, of all the things I forgot to check, it was that I had actually was in the shot. Stupid me. Okay, so welcome to my second big live stream. Was it my third? Third big live stream. The first being completely accidental, if you ever saw that. Today, the order of things to do is I'm going to draw the Patreon who wins. I have a pair of Dieter Audio. I always get the names mixed up. Dieter Audio, the Dream. I got a pair of Dieter Audio IAMs. I don't know why my brain is not working this morning. Anyway, they still sell for about $900, so that's going to be someone's going to enjoy that. And this is the I think it's my original review pair. At a guess, we got a review pair from them years and years ago, and it's a 3.5mm. So I'm pretty sure it's my original review pair with everything in there, and the tips will have been cleaned. Yeah, that's got that's got stock tips on there. Anyway, so that was probably my original review pair, and yeah, giving that away. So second order of the day is questions from patrons. I've decided to make the whole thing public because I think a couple of people turned up before, and that was kind of boring. So now about questions, I printed it. I got a very big list of very interesting questions from one patron, and I'm going to go through those. If that doesn't take up an hour or a couple of hours, I don't know. It's quite long. So if you have questions, posting them in the chat they might end up being skipped until I finish this lot. So I'll let you know when I do that, and then we'll have questions from anyone. And but before that, after that, then questions from anyone. And there's one which is probably not listed on here. Actually, a couple of them are not listed on here. So I asked my patrons to post questions on patreon.com, and well, yeah, I've got quite a list. So if I've still got time, if all goes well, then we can continue into that. And I expect to go for about maybe an hour and a half at a guess. So, well, let's get started. So, first is thanks to all my patrons. That's been really extremely helpful. It costs actually a lot of money to keep all this stuff running. There's actually, you can feel the heat coming off all the amps, although this one's not on. And actually, that's basically it's now I hope to get better microphones. I'm using a cheap shotgun microphone, actually off Massdrop, which is working quite well, and that's connected via actually one of a mini-to-mini cable that I had made for a portable setup, and so that should cut down the noise considerably. And I've turned off my external hard drive, so it's pretty quiet in here, although it's probably pretty echoey. My plan is to get a set of lavalier mics, so that wireless ones, so that I can hook that up to my camera and I can do interviews at the shows and that kind of thing. And that's probably going to make 90% of the difference. There'll be no noise issues. All of that will be taken care of. So thanks very much for your support. Actually, has encouraged me to keep going with this, and I've just been talking to manufacturers in the last few days about having more stuff sent over. Actually, these two will still be reviewed. The audiophile Solaris and Audio GD's R2R7 and the Master 9, and then these two will cycle out. This is going on to. I'm going to send this on to Dak Ladder, who's the crazy. He's probably taken the helm currently as the crazy guy for Audio GD stuff. So I'll send that on to him. This will go back to the manufacturer. And this one's tricky. I need to borrow some stacks for that. So I'd like to, hopefully, I need to contact Stacks again. I missed the last Tokyo show, so I didn't talk to them. But I'd like to borrow a full Stacks rig and do a review of that too. And a Mr. Speaker's Electrostat rig, if that's possible. But everyone in the dog will want to do a review of these, so we'll have to see. But people asked actually now, what do you think of the Eon Flow Open? I've intended to borrow a pair of those. I was supposed to. Things have been a bit crazy, but my plan is to review the kind of $800 to $900, the $700 to $800 range of headphones. AL Audio's Cascade, Eon Flow Open, and the Eon Flow again. I'll probably borrow a pair of those and go through those again. And generally cover that range, which I think has become a really big range because, there was a big gap between stuff that was around $500. Sony sort of tried to fill it with the good old, if you can see them, the Z7s in the background there. But that's, you know, that was the retail price, I think, for them was $600 or something originally. I don't remember, but it's gone down to 400, $600 or $700 actually. So that big gap between 500 and 1,000, which was kind of left open after the Hi-Fi Man HE500s disappeared. So that's all being filled in now, which is really interesting. Sort of the, you could say, upper mid-range enthusiast market, but they're still such kick-ass headphones. They're kind of eaten into the over $1,000 market, but that's a whole other discussion. Anyway, so first, what I'm going to do is, so we have some Dita audios. We have to draw it out, and hi to, I think, Dosgos, and who you said met me in Tokyo. Well, that's fantastic. Still around, still look the same. Yep. Well, if you come to Tokyo again, please, you know, join in one of the shows. That'd be really cool. And if you are visiting Japan and going around Japan, please come and visit. You're welcome to come and visit and listen to some headphones, or we'll go to the electronic stores and chat. That'll be quite fun, and a couple of people have done that, and that's been really cool. Anyhow, what we have now is a pair of Dita audios to draw. I just hit the space bar. I hope I didn't stuff anything up. Am I still going? Okay. So in here, we had more the patrons. Now, just a quick note: if you sign up in, say, February for Patreon, then everyone gets charged for their pledges at the beginning of the month. So if you sign up in February, then you'll be added to this draw. So there are a couple of people that are signed up in February who will be added to the draw, who joined then. If you signed up in March, you won't be, because you want to be, you could sign up, like, you could pledge anything you like and then withdraw the pledge before your card's charged, and that would be really unfair to everyone else. So if you sign up in February, you've been added in here. Now, so the time is to pick a piece of paper, random piece of paper, which is folded, and haha, this is really coincidental, who I just drew here. Now, I don't know if the camera won't see it, so I'm going to overlay my webcam, which has better focus on this. But there's a guy who just posted a massive, massive list of questions. And now these pieces of paper are folded, just in case you're wondering. And the guy who posted the questions, we can see his name there. Gentatsu, you are now the proud owner of a pair of Dita Audio IEMs. So you just need to send me your address. That's really funny. I just picked it out randomly. It was the guy who sent me this massive list of questions, which I'm going to answer. So, lucky man. I'm going to put those on the Dita Audios for you. So that's that out of the way, which is really funny. I just picked out the first one that was sitting there. Speaking of this man, this is the most excellent set of questions I've received so far. So let's get it started. I'll put them there. I put it on a piece of paper because what will happen is I'll put it on a window somewhere and lose it, as if I have to click on anything. Okay, so some topics I want to discuss. Yeah. No, purely coincident, I swear. Okay, I just picked out. It looks like I picked out the first piece of paper. No, I wouldn't rig that. I just don't have it in me. Also, I can't read the pieces of paper when they're folded. They're folded into four, just in case you're wondering. So I can't actually see who's on there. It's folded, looks like that. So, as you can see, a 2. Can I? I can't see it. Well, I have not in that time. Anyway, he's lucky. So maybe it was meant to happen. Now, let's just turn that off. Okay, so you can get in here. Okay, his first questions were: do manufacturers still have house sounds? Now, do manufacturers have fairly distinguishable sounds? Do you feel house sounds are good, and why? Do you feel manufacturers who make amps also tend to have a house sound? Kind of a follow-up to the above text, but what are the pros and cons of house sounds? I know that there were kind of, somebody said there was a British sound and an American sound back in 2-channel audio. I don't know. That's a complex one. Let's just go through some manufacturers and give some examples. Audio GD. Now, they have a particular circuit design, and Kingwood likes a particular circuit design that's dead neutral. It is a very slight touch mellow. And this is only through comparison, otherwise it just sounds dead neutral, and that's what he prefers. He likes the sound of the music to come through, and the more expensive, the bigger components you buy, the more you just hear the music more clearly, because there's more better circuitry in there. I know Apex Audio, which is Todd the Vinyl Junkie, and my name's gone blank on his name. If you saw my review of the Apex Sangaku, I just gone blank on his name. He likes designing amps with a very slight, tube amps, with a very, very slight touch of second harmonic distortion. So that's his house sound. So there's a slight tiny bit of euphoria. It's the same thing. Audio GD liked the old ladder DACs and has designed a ladder DAC, and it's slightly second harmonic distortion euphoric in its stock mode, which we'll get into in the review of it. I don't know if we can say Shit Audio has a house sound. It's maybe slightly aggressive in the treble with Shit Audio products, very slightly. But I haven't heard every single Shit Audio product. We have Chord that is just... There's some discussion of that. Is objectively supposed to be objectively perfect, but he does listen to his own components and came out with a design that had a particular sound. These headphones are kind of easier. Mr. Speakers has his own kind of house sound, which is getting a touch darker as time goes on, as the designs change and the bass is filled out a bit better. With other headphones, I suppose Focal has their own kind of house sound to a degree, except the Elio was a bit darker sounding than the Clearer the Utopia. Kind of very neutral. Who else do we have? I'd say that ALO Audio had their own house sound, as crazy it's going to sound even with cables. Very slight, what we call old school tube, which is very slightly what I call fun sounding or slightly V-shaped. It's extremely subtle, but is there. So that you feel a tiny bit more extension in the treble and a tiny bit more extension in the bass. And it's hard to say the Studio 6 had that, but the whole package with the cables and everything, if you saw the original review, it had that. Do I feel it's a good thing? Well, there are two aspects to that. In manufacturing that I understand, manufacturers will select components. Every component adds a tiny, tiny bit of distortion. And I've seen discussions if you go into DIY audio about, you can do this DIY design, but if you use this brand of capacitors versus that brand of capacitors, there's a slightly different sound. And sometimes it comes down to a choice of what distortion can be tolerated at any price point, and what kind of distortion is acceptable, like second harmonic distortion is just euphoric, and whether that's something they think is nicest to listen to. You have Woo Audio likes their second order harmonic distortion. They like that particular sound. Those kinds of things. Asgard 2 has a warm sound. Thanks for that. The Ragnarok. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I only heard it with the Mr. Speaker's ethers originally, and that had an interesting sound too, I suppose. Yeah, I remember it having very excellent bass, but a lot of detail and everything, no particular distortion. So I suppose it's like system matching. You're compromising, you're deciding what compromises match well in any design, and then you have purely objective stuff like the chord stuff, which is trying to minimize that to the absolute nth degree in the digital realm and in the analog realm. And this is going way, way, way back to when NWAV guy first came on Headfire. I thought, it'd be really interesting to see someone make a design that is purely objective and nothing else, and see how it sounds. And if you hadn't been acting like a big ass, that would have been really interesting if you hadn't gone slagging off the industry and ranting on and all that kind of thing. It actually would have been interesting in comparison. But in the end, the people who did do that were if you've seen the DIY Beta 22, that was designed purely objectively, and it was only listened to after the design was built, listened to once, and then it was put out. And the chord stuff is purely objective. So in that sense, these are designs without compromise, and it's interesting to hear how that comes out. And it's interesting now I have the Hugo 2 here, which is probably just out of shot, and the Master 9, and actually listening direct out of the Hugo 2 versus listening to the Master 9 and hearing slight differences is really fascinating in terms of both were designed to be dead neutral. So is there a good thing about house sound? That depends on kind of your goal for music. You know, there are people who make non-oversampling DACs, which are technically terrible, but people like listening with them. Uh, do I have a particular opinion on it? With headphones, I suppose you know if you get, say, Mr. Speakers, you know kind of what you're going to get. If you get ALO, campfire audio, there's some variance in there because they have different designs. But you're going to notice there's some similarities between the Vegas, the IEMs, and the Cascade, the headphones, which is going to be, I'll talk about in the review of those. So do I think it's a, I think manufacturers or designers tend to have some degree of house sound, depending what kind of components we're talking about, but is it a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, it's their goals that they want to make, and in some ways it can be good, you know, if they're aiming for dead neutral and that's what people want. If they're aiming for headphones that have a particular coloration, which we'll see with the Cascade and all the Vegas and their particular way of delivering bass, which will be very interesting indeed. So that's kind of, I mean, do you have to mix and match the components to get the best result out of the house sound, like bright components and warm components, or can you get purely neutral components that cut away all the distortion and bring just the music, and is that pleasant? So yeah, it's a difficult question. I don't think there's a straightforward answer, but I think now that it's easier to get a better handle on what is kind of technically good and bad versus what's sonically good and bad. There's a bit more clarity there. At least for me, there's a bit more clarity. Then I can look at it like, yeah, it's like, oh, well, if I'm listening with Bluetooth headphones, you know, on a train somewhere, I think probably I'd like a slightly coloured, warmer consumer tuning anyway, because brighter treble for some reason, when you have background noise, even if it is noise cancelling, tend to sound a bit harsher. And probably electronics probably introduce some distortion, like Bluetooth. Even high quality Bluetooth like aptX introduces a tiny bit of distortion into the treble, and I'd rather not hear it. So it's a compromise. Is the compromise better, or is aiming for absolutely purely objective neutral and objectively low distortion better? So it's kind of half and half. It can be one or the other. That's my thought on that. What is the monstrosity on the top left? Solaris. I'll talk about it later. Yes, it's a monstrosity in a good way. Next, but I haven't finished with Gentatsu. The country thing I've already addressed. In Japan and professional audio engineering around the world, there is generally a line between monitors and listening headphones, but I'm noticing, at least in the US and Canada, in what is considered to be an audiophile world, this line is slowly diminishing or crossing over. Audiophile headphones. Now, here's an interesting experience I had at Sony. I was given a pair of Sony monitoring headphones to listen with, and the sound was very kind of, the image was out here and very narrow. And from an audiophile perspective, that sounded terrible. But when I was told, I was just asked, what do you think of these? And I thought they sound very kind of almost mono, they're fairly neutral, the sound stage is very out there. And I was told they were designed for monitoring music production where, you know, you're recording, say, off a stage or whatever. And the idea was to give, you know, a precise image of what's going on out there. And for that, they did it perfectly. But for an audiophile perspective, they sounded like crap. So, is there a crossover? That's really, really complex. There was one guy on HeadFi who was using EQ'd SR007s for mastering stuff, or recording and mastering, and EQ'd to aim for a particular sound signature, aim for neutral that matched his hearing. So I think realistically, yeah, that's not probably an area I'm really great at. Recording is, you know, a whole different ball game altogether. So I don't know if there's so much of a crossover, but I think that with high-end headphones there tends to be mostly a tendency towards a fairly neutral reproduction. Sony monitoring, I think they were like a 7, something like 75-20 or something like that. That's what I don't remember what the exact. I think the Japanese model and the foreign model were actually had a different number, but anyway. 75-20? Something weird. I remember a 20 in there, but I could be wrong. So, I know nothing about music production. Well, not nothing, but close to nothing. In terms of, like, I've just never produced music or worked with people that produce music, so I'm not really a good person to ask about that. But from what I've seen, it's a complex world where you know, what are people mastering? Is it live music? Is it electronic? Is it other stuff? What are they aiming for? So I think that affects their gear choices as well. So I don't know if there's so much of a crossover, but some high-end headphones. David Chesky was using a prototype of the HE500. I remember that, and that was a fairly neutral headphone from as I remember it, reasonably neutral. But I think it's up to the individual. Oh, there was Odyssey. A lot of people were using Odyssey cans because they were fairly neutral in tuning. So I think it depends on the recording engineer and what their preferences are and how much those high-end headphones, you know, or the headphones they use meet their criteria and what they're listening out for. So, but I think the increase in the number of high-end headphones, most of which are tuned fairly neutral, probably has obviously crossed over into the pro audio world where I can hear more into the mix now and hear what's going on. That's fantastic, and that's probably where it's crossed over. Let's have a look. With Japan, dynamic range. Okay, more people are talking about dynamic ranges in sound in the past 3 years than ever before. How would you describe dynamic range? Well, I just go to Wikipedia and read what dynamic range is. It's the difference between the smallest sound and the loudest sound. Now, that's been talked about in, of course, a number of ways. The first is that CD quality audio is supposed to have better dynamic range, way better dynamic range than even the best analog tapes, and way better than a record has. And which, normal dynamic range and all the analog stuff is relatively poor, like 50 dB or something like that. And CD is minimum 96 and we're dithering 120? So the problem with CD, of course, when it came out is it had other issues to do with the filtering being crap, basically, and it sounding like crap, which has more been, pretty much been rectified now. So the other close place people are talking about in music, dynamic range, uncompressed music like classical music or some jazz, and stuff where a compressor has been put through a compressor and the quieter sounds have been brought out a bit. What would you listen for in headphones that would make you conclude that one product has better dynamic range than another product? That is very tricky. It's something I probably would want to explore. I'm not something I could give an answer of because I've never ever said I feel these X headphones or Y headphones have better dynamic range. I've only ever said I hear more detail, but that could be connected. I've had some headphones that sound a bit flatter in but what's flatness sounding? So I don't think I can really answer that. What would I listen for in terms of dynamic range? Maybe with headphones in that the closest I can guess is that when there are loud sounds, they don't drown out quieter sounds, like you have a lot of people talking about bass in headphones or IEMs bleeding into the mids. So you've noticed in some headphones that when they start, or with some systems, I'm not going to say headphones, early on when planers came out, most amps were geared towards high voltage output and not high current. And then, of course, you get high complex music would start blurring. But is that to do with dynamic range or just to do with amp drive? But with headphones, maybe. And this is, of course, again, just a guess, what I just said. If there's a lot going on in the music, the louder sounds drowning out the quieter sounds. Maybe that would be it. But I want to ask someone who knows what they're talking about in this kind of thing to do with the technicalities. But it's a question I might ask, actually. See what if I ask some engineers and see what they say. Okay. Do you feel that some people have an off definition of understanding of the word when using dynamic range? All the time. People use all sorts of words and screw them up. I think microphonics. That was nothing. That's generally to do with tubes, and people were calling, like, I can hear my fingers rubbing against the cable in my headphones, microphonics. So yeah, they screw that up all the time. People are lazy. I'm lazy sometimes, or very often actually, and I screw stuff up. I screw stuff up in videos, and it's like, well, okay, I screwed up. But some people are. If people are lazy about definitions, and I think assuming that everyone knows what they're talking about, assuming that everyone is not being lazy, and not checking yourself and reading and researching yourself can be a problem. And I think probably maybe in the world today the biggest problem is ignorance and not wanting to be other than ignorant and just stay with opinions and not have to deviate from them. And then it goes crazy and people have to fight for their belief systems, which even though they've been proved nuts, because anyway, there's a road I don't want to go down. But yeah, people screw stuff up. That's just a fact. People have been around. I screw stuff up, so I wouldn't take my word for everything I say either. And it's important to kind of do as much research as you can. And I think one of the big things that people screwed up was digital. People pitched, non-oversampling DACs and minimum phase filters and all that kind of thing. They talked about how pre-ringing and post-ringing what did they use to do that? Impulse responses. Well, impulse responses don't exist in music. So you're showing pre-ringing and post-ringing, which shows up for an illegal signal into a digital component, and then complaining about it. It's like, no, it was ass backwards. So the whole digital thing has been upside down, even with manufacturers, it seems, talking rubbish. So that's like the whole thing about, what means what has been a big issue. And then I'm going to talk about MQA later, and that's been a big one too, for exactly the same reasons. What else is there? Do you feel older recordings with actual analog instruments and vocals are better reference for dynamic range and just as good at referencing dynamic range in sound? Well, analog recording in the studios, I guess, going to have, if you have a synthetic music, it's whatever someone has hit a keyboard or put a series of notes into some music. So there's a lot of stuff that maybe a lot of subtlety. Like if you've ever heard Friday Night in San Francisco, you can hear, I could hear with the Utopias. I guess it would work with Stax too. You can hear the degree of reverb on the guitars for each note in some passages very, very easily. And there are particular sections I go over again and again and again going between the three DACs I have here, three main DACs, and pick out which one I could hear that subtle reverb after the note was played and how much. And I talked about in the Hugo 2 review, and I just don't think you're likely to have that in electronic music. I mean, who would go that far down to into an electronic music recording to put that kind of subtlety in there? Do people do that? I don't think so. So that's my thought on that. Let's see, where are we at? This should probably not be talked about as it can be controversial. Well, of course. Do you feel different formats, LP, CD, FLAC, AAC, or different bit rates can affect the dynamic range, or could it be more dependent on the original recording that was done? That's a good question. Does modern lame MP3 encoding drop dynamic range? I've never asked that question. I know it can cut, depending on the amount of compression, it can cut. And it cut frequencies out. It's designed using clever noise. I think it was noise shaping. And again, don't understand the technology fully. Instead of just cutting, the old MP3, which was a straight bit rate, would just cut everything below a certain level of audibility. That they use tricks to make more complex sections of the music, less cutting and less less compression, and the more quiet bits more compression, or something like that. Anyway, it's more complex using very careful acoustic analysis. But to me, I still feel, and other people have too, that MP3 just sounds flatter. And this is complex. It depends on gear, headphones, all sorts of factors. Like I sit in my car and I listen to MP3 forever, so I just don't care when I'm in the car. But here, there are people who've gone up to manufacturers at shows and gone, oh, can I listen to XYZ? And then they'll put on some headphones and say, well, can I listen to a non-MP3 version of this? And they go, no, well, music is lossless. And they go, no, this is an MP3. And they go, no way. Everything and nothing is lossless. And they, please check. And they checked, it was an MP3. So there are people who are that sensitive to it. And what are they picking out? That's kind of really freaky. But I don't, we know that records have less dynamic range because it's just a technical fact. Why in the high end do people like this stuff so much? What's going on? I was listening with the manufacturer to his $5,000 DAC, and then we thought, and we were experimenting with USB and other things, and I was talking to him about, input quality and all that kind of stuff, which, he had an idea of, obviously, but probably hadn't mucked about as much as I had. And, a lot of manufacturers are like, okay, this meets technical spec, it's good enough, blah, 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 or have measured it, it seems to be good enough, but then we switched to his record player, and it was just way better. But this shouldn't make any sense. But it just sounded nicer. Maybe it was just a nice euphoric second harmonic distortion euphoria sound. I don't know, some jazz, or it was really lovely anyway. So I mean, if you overthink it, you can go crazy. But I think if you enjoy listening, then who cares? Um, well, we can talk about dynamic range, but let's say that you're listening to a record of some classical music, and of course the dynamic range is going to be limited. But is the dynamic range is enough to cover, and there's to be no compression, if you're getting your, 40, 50 decibels of dynamic range out of a record, that may be enough. It may be just enough to cover and give you the feeling of what's going on that, you're not going to notice anything. Whereas, you have a huge dynamic range with CD, but if the music has been compressed, well, you've got lost probably more. So maybe it's just a lot of the factor has to do with a lot of digital music nowadays is compressed. And a lot of stuff that people like listening to on records and tapes, I guess, is less compressed. So that's probably more of a factor. Probably not just factor of what's technically possible and but what is actually going on with the actual pieces of music. Okay, so that was long. How long did we go for that? That was only 30 minutes. So now I'm going to read what all you guys have been asking about and catch up. So first question, we'll go for Albert's question. I know you still have to go through the list, but I was wondering about a few things. I'm planning a few purchases and recall that you said you don't prefer tube amps with IEMs. Well, okay. I'm going to have to drink water now. Well, IEMs are very sensitive. Tube amps tend to generate noise. That's 90% of it. To have a tube amp output have a low enough output impedance to work with IEMs, it's going to have a solid state stage in there probably anyway. Or some nice expensive transformers. So generally, I can plug IEMs into the Studio 6, but I'm going to hear the noise, the hiss, background hiss, or the noise level much more readily. So with IEMs, you want something that's low noise anyway. So that's the main reason. I mean, there are other things like I have sitting here, testing a new product, but Hi-Fi Man RE2000, they're like 60 ohm dynamic drivers. They're like headphones, so fine. They power out of this brilliantly. But that's a rare exception. Andromedas, you plug into that, it's like, you hear, not that loud, but there's a lot of hiss. So it's just not a good match, technically. What headphone would you say works best with a Dave from your personal experience? I don't have a Dave here, I can't tell you. Now, going back to my experience with the Utopias and that weird issue with cables and crosstalk. What appeared to be crosstalk anyway. It could be Utopias with the Dave. Other people have Utopias in the Dave and not the stock cable maybe. And they've had fantastic results. So I want to try that again. I'm actually planning when I go to Tokyo to take my Utopias to the demo room, which has the Dave and the Bluetooth in it, and try it again. So Utopia, I'll probably say Utopias are going to be fine. If they're fine out of the Hugo 2 now, they'll be fine out of the Dave. So that's my answer for that. The LCD2 was one of my favorite headphones. I don't like the closed model so much, but your mileage may vary. Okay. I see. Loudness wars. Loud noises. This is really funny, aside, I teach at schools, and I've seen that sometimes the kids have these bizarre t-shirts with really random English on them. Some of them are just nonsense, but I had this one kid, she's walking down the hall, this second grader, I'm looking, and she's got this thing that says, "Make more noise." And I looked at it and just laughed. I told the teachers what it meant, and they just laughed. It was hilarious. And there's another kid that had, "My genes made me this way," and there's this huge kid that was super tall. And I told him what it meant, and it was so funny. So amazing coincidence. So, yeah, that's my thought on loud noises. Some of the old pro analog equipment was extremely well engineered and incredibly expensive, and sometimes sounded nice. Yes, and there are hi-fi stores called Hi-Fi Door, which get this stuff. They change all the capacitors, because all the capacitors are screwed, and they rewire it or whatever is necessary. And you can buy it. So they have tons of old Lux kit amps, and yeah, they rebuild a lot of old gear, fixing the electronics, and you can buy this stuff. So yeah, some of it was really incredibly over-engineered. And another thing, like even the metal quality was better. People were talking about scrap steel like 80 years ago, whatever it was way better than the quality of high-quality steel now and stuff, because they took more time and more care with it, but everything now is done so much faster. I've been to a steelworks actually when I was a kid, of all things, so I kind of have that image in my head of big, huge planks of steel which were sitting to cool. I mean, it's not impossible to build, overbuild stuff now, and some stuff now is overbuilt. But yeah, everything, kind of. I guess this is why we use new old stock tubes a lot. They were built to kind of in a different era, weren't they? An electronic track with subtleties. That will be interesting to check out, actually. That'd be something to explore. I'll make a note of that later. I'll copy and save that. If that character on Bandcamp? I'm going to save your comment and I'll give it. I'll cut and paste into a note, otherwise I'm going to lose it. And I'll give that a listen and see what I can make out, because the system now, I make out a ridiculous amount of detail. Spongle, I probably may have seen me say Spongle. I can hear in the latest album, I can hear the bits of the mix cut in and out. Do vintage record players produce high quality music despite their old style? I suppose it depends on the record player. There are relatively inexpensive ones and there are super expensive ones. So it depends on the quality of the motor and how smooth the motor is. A lot of it, and how good the arm and the stylus is. So it's old or new, it still comes down to the same things. When are you going to Tokyo? I think it's April 29 is the next show. I haven't checked. I'm still way behind on organising this. But there's a Fuji Avic show, so I go to that. It's 2 days over the weekend. Last year it was on what's called Showa Day, which is a public holiday. So it's the beginning of the Japanese Golden Week holidays, which means it's kind of chaotic. And I probably should book my everything soon. But yeah, so that's when I next go to Tokyo. Have you heard the costume? Yes, I have. I thought it was actually pretty good. I think it was like, what is it, $400. And it would have been interesting to compare it to, say, the ALO Dynamic Driver IMs, because it was kind of getting up. I thought it was actually pretty good, getting up there. Very strange and very freaky design, but it was very good. And it's the same guys who make the actual Pentacon connector, for which Sony uses. So I met the guy, actually he was in Fukuoka. He didn't go to the Tokyo show, but I met him in Fukuoka when they had an extension to the earphone show. And I thought they were pretty good sounding IMs. I thought of reviewing them, but I didn't get round to it. On eBay you can get a Hugo one for about $1,200 to $1,300, which is the same as a Poly combo. Given transport quality is going to probably be better on the Poly, as long as they've sorted out their software issues, I'd probably go for a Mojo Poly now for preference. It depends what you're going to do. If I'm going to take it portably or use it in the car, I'd go for a Mojo and Poly. If you're going to use it on a desk, well, you might want to add on shit weird or some other kind of high quality USB or whatever input, then I'd probably just go for the Hugo. Or I'd just save up money every month and get a Hugo 2. Wait it out. Put some money aside every month and get a Hugo 2. If you've not heard anything in the under 500 price range, what would you recommend? What, for IEMs or headphones? Or I've got some under $500 IEMs floating around here. Here we go. It doesn't catch on stuff. I've got some New Force IEMs which are in for review, which from GearBest. I want to check them out. They're kind of warm, and they come with 2 cables, an audiophile cable, which apparently someone else reviewed them and they broke, and a regular cable. But anyway, I'll review those. Yeah, under $500, there are people who've heard like everything, and I kind of am getting reluctant to check out anything kind of really low in the range in terms of IEMs, because someone will come out and go, oh, but XYZ is better, these are crap, or something like that. So it's kind of, there are people who are way ahead of me in that kind of range. Do you prefer custom or universal IEMs? Probably now I'd say custom, but now you can get the laser scan customs. They're slightly more comfortable. So they're sitting around. Do I have them here? Let's see, do I have them in this case? I have them because I was going to review them. I do. Okay, so they're not connected to anything at the moment. I do have both. Yeah. Okay. So I have... let's do the web thing, otherwise you can't see anything. I have Ultimate Ears reference monitors, and they were done by the head guru in Ultimate Ears, who injected my ears with silicone. And there's slightly different comfort level to some with very long overdue for review, and currently got a fancy cable on them. Ultimate Ears reference remastered, which you probably can't see. These were done using the scanner at CanJam, SoCal, and I think it was CanJam SoCal, or the one before that, when they first started doing the electronic scanning. Actually the same one where Rob Watts got his first pair of IEMs from Ultimate Ears. And that one is slightly more comfortable. So I'd probably say now, good things about universals, of course, there's the same problem. If you buy them, you don't like them, you can sell them. If you have customs, you buy them, you don't like them, sometimes you can sell them and they can be rebuilt. Most of the time you can't. So if I really like, well, yeah, I'd probably say, given I hate sticking stuff in my ears anyway, I'm probably slightly prefer either something that works well with spin fit tips or customs. And then foam tips, even though they've got better isolation, kind of get uncomfortable after about 5 minutes for me. Campfire Orions. Yes, I should actually review those. I've been slack. Mr. Speakers, I got to ask Dan about that. Everyone and their dog will want to review these, but yes, I want to do a whole Stacks versus Mr. Speakers thing, which will be awesome. Get Etymotics. Oh, John Yang is here. Mr. Etymotic. What lead would you go to for a top-of-the-line tube amp from main amplifier rather than solid state? Good question. Probably Apex. Where does he have anything between $10,000 and about $2,000-3,000? I don't remember. Who else is top of the line? Eddy Current, I don't know. I haven't tried enough of his stuff. Not consistently. I don't know. Haven't tried enough. I've only tried a bit of Apex and the Studio 6, and I know other stuff will be coming out. And like everyone, I wish Cavalli Audio had not folded and come out with their liquid tungsten. That was just the most fantastic sounding thing ever. But too bad. But I think some other stuff will be coming out, which might be worth checking out. But we'll see. Have you heard 64 audio stuff yet? I keep forgetting. I wanted to hear the top of the line IMs at Tokyo, and there was a queue. So I thought I'll come back later and check them out. And then I forgot. So that's always the way. Okay. You probably ask me every stream. Okay, you can ask me every stream. Ask me after Tokyo. I'll try and do a better job this time in Tokyo. I'll actually try and make a list. I've tried. Tokyo is so huge with the show that it's like 5 or I think it's even gone up to 6 floors now. They've literally hijacked the whole building, and it's. I aimed initially to go floor by floor, so it goes. The floor levels are ridiculous too. 6, 11, 13, 14, 15, and there's no one more. I think level 8 snuck in there. Some back rooms, which is where. Who was it? Final. We got what used to be called Final Audio had prototypes of their new planer, and so I used to go do one floor, finish everything. That's it, not going back, and then the next floor, finish, and then keep going. But it doesn't always work out that way. Before I was going up and down, and missing stuff, and it was like I'd go somewhere, listen, make notes, take some photos, and then come back and take some more photos when there were less people. And then afterwards, trying to do a show report where you got photos all over the place was a nightmare. So the problem is if there are queues, it can be very troublesome. But what I try and do now, I can sneak in before the show starts and listen to stuff, or at the very, very end, sometimes I can get to stuff that's had big queues. So it depends. MQA thoughts. Oh yes, I was going to talk about MQA. Hold on. I'll answer the shit audio one, otherwise it'll get buried. Yeah, euphoric and warm system. If you're finding it overly aggressive, I don't think you need a warmer system. I think you just need a system with lower distortion. The question would be, why does it sound aggressive? Is it something like maybe the earlier ones were a bit You know, so I remember someone saying like a Chord Mojo was about the same level as the old Shure Audio mid-range system. So with LCD3s, would a Mojo drive LCD3s? I don't remember. That's kind of tricky. So it'd be maybe worth looking into what is causing it to sound harsh, or see what people say who owned the early systems. Is it the USB input wasn't so good? Is it noise coming in through your system? Is it just the DAC itself is not so great? Is it something else? I don't know. So knowing actually what the cause is might be good, because if you have, say, a really crappy computer feeding something via USB, and you get even a really excellent DAC like the Hugo 2, and then you have you know, a crappy computer feeding it via USB, then it's still going to have the same kind of issues. So no, you could go up to Ragnarok, and you could go to Iggy and Ragnarok and just go the full kit. That would work. Yeah, Tokyo is crazy. MQA. I'm going to do MQA because I said I'd go for an hour and a half, and MQA is going to take up stuff. First of all, if you have not already, go to Computer Audiophile and go to the front page, and there is a big thing on MQA which, to put it mildly, destroys it. And read it, and then read at least the first 11 pages of comments. If you're reading the front page article version, if you're reading the forum version, it's something like the first 50, it's not 11, it's way more comments, it's way fewer comments per page, so it's probably the first 40 pages. It's carnage. It's been demolished so thoroughly that I would say that, being an Australian where we have very strict consumer protection laws, that if they marketed MQA as it has been presented by reviewers in the magazines, that they would be some serious issues, I think. And I'm not a lawyer, but I think they'd have serious issues. I was going to do anything on MQA, but it's kind of complex. Actually, John Darko did a far better thing on his blog, and I couldn't really compete with that without saying just the same thing as he has. It's a mix of technologies that were marketed in a way that were blurred together so that in a very obscure way, so that it wasn't clear exactly what was going on. The thing is under technical, very careful examination. There was originally, now you see all the, now if you go to Bob Stewart's blog, or Bob Stewart's site, he says, he doesn't say the Studio Master anymore. He says Studio Preview, which is what? Now all the magazines that first reported on MQA say the Studio Master, which means that the impression we were given is that there was some system to, first of all, reprocess the original masters to fix issues in the ADCs. That has been thoroughly demolished as being using some simple filter, a series of simple filters, which actually increase distortion. The second thing is being Studio Master, which would mean the bit perfect original. And now we know without a doubt that MQA is lossless, because the high bits, even in the 1644 version, are not lossy, because that's where the MQA data is. It's supposed to be 16. Not 16-bit, it's supposed to be 24-bit, where the high bits of the 24-bit file contain the MQA data. So an MQA CD is obviously going to only be 16-bit, so it's going to be lossy. So you have distortion added by processing, and one really, really crazy example of this, go and listen to In Excess on Tidal, and then go and listen to the non-MQA version, and go and listen to the MQA version. There's a pitch change, significant pitch change. There's some crazy stuff in there. Now, sure, it may sound better, but someone pointed out that, let's say you have one of the greatest posts that someone made in response to that article was to describe how images are manipulated. Now, when I take a photograph, through this camera, in fact, I'll take a photograph of, say, the landscape outside, which you can't see any of because of the sunlight, and it's a kind of dull green. But, you know, let's say I've just caught, you know, a nice sunrise and out in nature and stuff like that. To me, I really feel how impressive this looks, and I take the picture and I get back and it looks really, the raw image looks really dull. So I'll enhance it. I'll bump the saturation and the vibrance, and I'll enhance it to give you the same kind of feeling as I got And my screen backgrounds are stuff that's obviously been enhanced, and I know it. And I know in comparison, it looks, some of these shots, I've seen of nature look fake. In that, not that they're fake, but the colors are obviously been bumped. And you can enhance the contrast. There's all sorts of tricks you can do. I'll play around with it to get something that feels what I want it to do. But it's not a realistic. It looks really nice. It's really nice to have as a picture on my wall, or it's really pleasant to show on the web and looks fantastic. But it is not an accurate rendition of what's there. And someone pointed out that MQA seemed to be like this. This is after the technical analysis where people say John Atkinson of Stereophile, he went and listened to the non-MQA version of a file and then the MQA version as presented by Meridian. He didn't have the original files to check. And he said the MQA version sounded so much better, and he thought this sounded I don't know what word he used, but he thought it was up. The MQA sounded like it was going to be up there with the development of the CD, the development of the MP3, revolutionary. And he's now been very, very, very thoroughly beaten in the comments on Computer Audiophile. But it seems like they have enhanced some of the music to make it sound better, and maybe it does. And this is coming way back to the discussion I had earlier in this video. Whereas, house sound and what sounds good, and component synergy, and this talking about a bit of euphoria added in tube amps or maybe in R2R DACs, and what sounds good and what sounds pleasant and what's nice, and you can bring out fake detail in a photo, not fake detail, but you can enhance the contrast around edges, and it makes things seem like like the old unsharp mask, which is the most famous tool probably now in Photoshop ever, where it very slightly blurs in complete detail, but where you have edges, it brings out the edges a little bit better, and it seems sharper, even though it truly isn't. And it seems like this is what MQA has done in that section. And then you have the whole origami thing. While it's probably technically very clever, it's now been analyzed, and people have suggested that really the analysis suggests that it's really just app sampling, and of course not the Studio Master at all, because we're talking about stuff in the ultrasonic range above the human hearing when we're talking about this stuff. And there's been plenty of people who talked about, like way back, Dan Lavery talked about he'd never do a 192K ADC because it's just noise. Basically, you're just adding noise from the ADC into the mix. So all this high stuff above the audible range is either aliasing of the original content in the circuits, or it's just noise. It's just circuit noise, high frequency circuit noise. And so this whole argument about Studio Masters containing all the original bits seems to be, apart from one direction, killed by that fact that you're just all the above human hearing range stuff could just be useless noise or aliasing to begin with. And then on the other hand, whether MQA is actually recording the Studio Master, which is what all the press were told, and now they don't say Studio Master anymore. So it's been very, very thoroughly taken apart. And then let's not even get into DRM, digital rights management. Need I say more? No. If go read the whole thing, it's carnage, and the comments are just brutal. How Stereophile is going to get out of this? But the interesting thing is who hyped it. And a couple of magazines said, we're cautious. This doesn't really convince us. And it's interesting to see who was cautious and who hyped it. And now, who would you, if someone hyped MQA and had been totally demolished, would you trust reviews from those magazines? So, yeah, it's going to be quite brutal. So now I'll get back to reading your comments, because they're probably way, 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 way behind. Okay. Let's find MQA thoughts. So there's my MQA thoughts. Go read the article. Go read the whole thing. It's amazing. With Cavalli out of business, is there a similar amp like Liquid Carbon? I'm going to say nothing. Wait. Is there anything to rival the Focal Utopia in terms of detail resolution? IEMs, I don't know. That'd be good to check out, like the really, like the flagship. The 64 audio. I want to check those out. Yes, hold on. What am I thinking? The Shure KSE 1500. I don't know, I have to compare directly, but they are a big possibility because they're electrostats. What what is the in case about the MQA thread, it's on the front page of Computer Audiophile. It's an article, so the article version is a pain because every time you go to the next page of comments, you have to scroll through the whole article. So there is a thread. You'll find it because it's going like a rocket. If you go to recent threads, it'll be in the first page easily. What aspects of optical input make it better than USB for audio? This is an interesting thing I was discussing. So optical obviously isolates out any noise. Now, so what I did with the Hugo 2 is because its jitter rejection is excellent according to Rob Watts, and I should be able to plug a crappy USB cable into my Hugo 2 and into my computer, and it should still sound the same. And it didn't. It sounded much, much worse. With the Mojo, an AK100 versus an AK240 as an optical source using the same cable sounded worse. So what was going on? I think it was the same problem as USB in that in reprocessing the digital signal to remove the jitter, or send on the signal without the jitter, that maybe whatever electronics in there were generating more noise, and that was what was getting into the output. And there was a similar thing came up, is that this discussion about whether you need a good power supply for the new Chord Q test, because Rob Watts reckoned the stock power supply sounded fine, but other people have said in the past things like, even though the power supply for the 2-Qt, should have been fine, it sounded worse in my system than using a high quality power supply. Probably what was happening is that the noise from the power supply was going back into the other analog components, not inside the Chord product, but inside other components on the same power board. So sometimes you have to look for the solution. The answer to weird problems is not quite so obvious. So if you're going to use optical, use a good quality optical cable. So in a sense, it's the same reason people use high quality USB, things like audiophile Plus, USB, software that gets exclusive mode or direct mode to the USB DAC. You want something that is going to cause the components to generate the least amount of internal noise and affect the output audio signal. So that's my thought on that. So yeah, again, when you're looking at audio, if you get something that seems to contradict logic, sometimes it's something else going on which you didn't think of in the first place. It's not what's immediately obvious. So it's kind of interesting in that. Where were we next? So that was Davis's question, and me yakking about photography. Audio Technica flagship is the same or more amount of detail than Utopia's. Oh, I'll kick Ionic's ass. I don't believe that. If Audio Technica, okay, you go to the Tokyo shows, you go to Sony's booth, it's all the engineers, right? You talk to Nao, he's like one of the lead engineers. You talk to the guy who made their PH1, PH2, PH3 directly. Go to Audio Technica's booth, it's a bunch of junior marketing guys. So I don't mind the junior marketing guys, but it's kind of like, I want to ask a serious question. Like their new Bluetooth headphones which don't use a DAC, and people go, how does it not use a DAC? And I looked at the description and go like, that's just DSD. They just change it to DSD and then output it with a low with a filter. So, which, if you didn't already know, DSD, if you put a raw digital DSD signal straight into analog output, you get you get sound. So DSD is really fascinating in how simple it is, but how messy it is. The result is messy. So if Audio Technica has come out with something with more detail than a Utopia, which is not $4,000, I'll fall off my chair. I am skeptical, but I prefer to be pleasantly surprised. Optical better sounding than USB for all my DACs. Cool. Probably, yeah. A lot of it's probably noise. Now the chat jumped and I lost it. Okay. No, I found you again. I wonder if there's any difference streaming Tidal on a cheap transport with optical versus a 3K or Endovir optical. The DAC is doing all the work. Again, try it and see. It depends on the DAC. Knowing what's causing a problem without having a lot of expensive electronic equipment is really hard, and this is why we do hit and miss stuff. Like we try a different cable, we try a different input, we try a different... I switched to my Raspberry Pi. I like the sound better using it as a Roon endpoint than a Mac that I have hiding under here. Why, I don't know. Maybe something is generating less noise, which is causing less whatever, or I don't know. But it just, to me, it feels better. It feels like it's slightly less harsh, a bit smoother. I don't know why. I can just guess from what people have said and what we know about electronics. So you just have to try stuff. So, you know, Should Audio is supposed to solve everything with their Generation 5. It's supposed to be that's it. They've isolated noise, blah, 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 finished. I better continue on this before my camera... If this picture suddenly disappears, it's called the battery's gone flat and I'll have to switch to the webcam. What would you say about some headphones are sensitive to the digital side and DAC, and some barely change sound and sound good on all DACs? It could be some combination of their treble peak, which will be between 6 and 9 or 10K, corresponds with whatever irritating noise is getting into the system. That's my guess, because that's where you tend to notice it most. I don't know if it's sensitive to the digital side. You know, it's everything has distortion. There are two ways to get around distortion. One is to kind of avoid it. You know, sometimes you mix and match components and it neutralizes out some distortion and it sounds better. Other things, you just want to remove the distortion and then it sounds better. So again, because we don't have a lot of expensive equipment, you know, I'd love to have a whole suite of oscilloscopes here instead of amps and experiment with stuff and go, well, this produced more noise than this, but I have to pull everything apart and stick probes in and blow stuff up. I don't want to do that. So we just, as people who just listen, we just have to experiment and try things and see what we like. Where are we? Software stuff. MQ like a remaster. More or less, yeah, it's kind of like a very kludgy remaster of a lot of music, combined with a very funky way of what supposedly was folding high-res info, which you don't have to really care about, into a low-res file. It's now, the very cynical version is it's about selling you music again and getting money from the recording companies by doing this tricky thing where they can lock in. You know, if you listen to Tidal now, anything from Universal Music has like a distorting watermark in it now. So everything from Universal Music is less than the original CD quality output, which is terrible. So you can actually hear its audible distortion if you compare a CD versus anything from Universal Records. You compare the CD versus the Tidal, it's going to sound different. It's a very subtle kind of distortion in there, but it's watermarking to stop people trying to steal the music. So you don't want to do it. MQA is just, yeah, it may sound nicer, but it's not. What happened to Cavalli Audio? Okay, Alex Cavalli, he was doing the whole making DIY amps as a hobby, like designing stuff as a hobby. And people badgered him to start a commercial company, and for various reasons he did. And that, you know, he's producing a whole bunch of stuff, but he was close to retirement age. He didn't want to continue anymore. And he wanted to hand over the whole company to other people and, you know, have someone else take over and continue it on. But nobody wanted to do that. And I won't, you know, it's stuff I can't talk about, but it's people's personal decisions about what they do. But in the end, he just said, I'm going to retire, and he just gave up. And the last thing he did was the mass drop. He licensed these designs to mass drop. Not all of them, just the ones that you see there, the Cavalli stuff you see there. So he's just retired. He just doesn't want to deal with the stress, and he wants time with his family, which you can't do if you're running a business that's taking in a lot of money. And you know, these amps sold really, really well. Okay. Now the. Hold on for a... Okay. What is better, Shit Audio multibit or Audio GD R2R? My impression so far is that they're different. The short answer will be... Now, I don't have the latest Yggdrasil upgrades, and I've got to think about what I'm going to do about those. Audio GD may be slightly more euphoric with stock firmware, and this is a kind of funny thing, because there are two firmwares that are available for this. The Yggdrasil was, my original Yggdrasil is slightly grayer sounding. The new Yggdrasil is supposed to be slightly better sounding. It's very, very close. There's not a bad choice. Some people are fanatical about DSD, or they definitely want to use their own I2S transport. Well, then they have to get an Audio GD. Some people who just want to buy American would buy Shit Audio. I don't think there's a bad choice in there. So it's very, very fine difference. It's down to the designer's preference. So most of it, given how much now Audio GD has just upgraded their USB to be internally powered via a special power supply, and it's isolated USB now, which I don't have in this one, and that's supposed to be much better. Yeah, pick whatever you feel you want to pick if you were choosing. So it's very, very close. Empire ears, I should check them out. Audio GD NFB1 amp for my LCD3. Do I think it's better than a Shit layer? I haven't had the Shit Audio one in, so I can't tell you. Yeah, it depends, I guess, if you want to stuff around with tubes or not, but it's hard to say. Planning on going to Japan in summer of 2019. What places in Tokyo would you recommend to visit? There was a robot cafe, which I haven't been to. My friends, everyone has been there, has said it's amazing, and which has some incredible show. I think it's Robot Cafe or something like that. I don't know, but summer of 2019. It depends what you like in Tokyo. I mean, Tokyo is just so huge. They have a fridge museum somewhere in there. It's yeah, I don't know. It's just I can't even think about it now. I'd have to sit down and think about what I'd like to visit. But it's the kind of things you want to. I think just the whole city is just unbelievable. You just go anywhere and there's food. I'm a vegetarian, but so I can't eat 99% of what's in Tokyo. But for people who just go there's just great food everywhere. But the one I remember was the Robot Cafe that I was told about. You should check out. I think it was called a Robot Cafe. But anyway, it had these shows which were apparently really amazing. Blow stuff up. No, I don't think so. I want to buy I've lost it now. I want to buy a pair of CIMs, but I'm confused about acrylic 3D and silicon. Don't know about those things. There's normal acrylic is what you got. This is normal acrylic, your regular ones. Hold on, where's my webcam gone? I haven't tried silicon ones, but they're normal acrylic. They're just hard, but they're supposed to fit your ear so well that it's not a problem. Silicon I haven't tried. I'd be interested to try though. I'll see if maybe I can try that for a review. Core Mojo's top end is diminished with layered, louder music. What are you plugging your Mojo into? What headphones? It does have output capacitors on there, but it could be if you're using a big pair of planers, I don't know how loud are you listening too? That's something to consider. Yes. I hope I don't pronounce this wrong. Doskos is correct. If you're going to Tokyo, go to the Fujiavic store and earphone. Earphone is like a supermarket, almost like a supermarket of headphones. It has everything. Occasionally stuff is broken though. Stuff gets worn out because a bazillion people have tried to listen with a pair of headphones and has broken the cables. It's pretty incredible. You go there and make sure to check that your credit card will work there. Check your credit card will work overseas, or just bring a ton of cash. Earphone is just crazy. You'll be in there for hours, and if you don't end up. The other thing is the big in Akihabara, next to the train station, there's a huge Yodobashi camera. That has a floor, and if you see my old Tokyo show reports, it has a floor with headphones and audio on it. It has like high-end stuff in like glass in the glass cases at the counters. It's just nuts. And it has this whole section where you can sit down and listen to headphones. And I've known people to go to Tokyo and listen all day until the security kick them out. And it has all high-end headphones you can try. So that's pretty crazy too. There's also the Dyna 5555. I'll type that in the chat. Hold on. You can just search for this online. It's been around forever. That also has a big section where you can listen to a lot of headphones and comfy chairs. I haven't been to it for ages, so it's probably still there. But it's this store where the first floor is all headphones and stuff like that. then as you go up each level, the quality of the hi-fi goes up, and up to the 8th floor. And the 8th floor has like enough transparent cables on the floor to buy a house, and it has like TAD and a DCS and super crazy stuff. And if you can't just walk, if you walk in there and the salesman looks like, you go, oh, that Japanese, it's the one place where the salesmen are not nice to you, unless you sound like you're serious. I don't know if they're really keen about letting foreigners walk in there and try the stuff. At the lower floors, they're not so bad. But at that kind of level, they're just like sick of the tourists walking in there and wanting to listen. But it's not always open all the time either. Is the NF one good as a preamp? Yes, it's pretty decent. It's nice with active speakers. So I mean, I haven't used it on a high-end system, but it's pretty decent with active speakers. What is your most expensive IEM? The most expensive IEM I bought was I actually bought my original. Where are they? JH Audio. JH13 Freak Phase, I actually bought those, so they were really expensive. But I actually bought them to use, so I don't usually use IEMs for the most of the time. The most expensive that I have here still are, if I don't drop stuff on the floor, which I do, are probably the Roxans. They're still sitting here. I just boxed them up again. I think. You know, I was wrong in my earlier part of the video. I was wrong. These are my JH13s. I lied. I just looked over here and I just found my Ultimeteers reference monitors. So I lied, sorry. I got it mixed up. It's been one of those days already. It's been one of those weeks. What else is there? I know there are a lot of CD and record stores with new and used music. Yes, if you want records, and you have to think about carrying them back and taking them on a plane when you do this. Record stores, even crappy records, like when they say stuff is good quality in a record store in Japan, they mean it's really good. So even stuff that's average here is probably way better than what people call good in the US. So I'm told. So I know people who come over here for the shows, and the first thing they do, they spend a whole day in the record stores just finding stuff. So it's something to consider. I understand, actually, thinking about the money thing before, yeah, I don't like talking about money either. I don't like asking for it, so it was kind of really odd for me to actually ask people to help out here. But you know, in the end, if it gets everything going still and pays for my electricity bill and some better mics, why not? Tokyo, you can buy a lot of, yes. Where are we? Okay, I've posted about that. And the chat has jumped because I'm near the end. Custom art for silicon. That's interesting. After a mech, keep that in mind. Mojo goes into an LSR 305. What's that? Now, it's something that's probably worth something like a forum post to discuss. Japan sounds like an audiophile paradise. Yes and no. You'll get hi-fi stores which are crammed into these really narrow buildings like the width of this room. And, you know, you'll have, I'll put this, if I link, Art Crew is my local one, enthusiast one, which has second-hand gear. And they have like this huge pair of horns in a room the size of like a living room. It's a small living room. It's really, really, really ridiculous. They sound good as long as you don't try and play orchestral. So, yes and no. Overseas stuff is ridiculously expensive. Really, really, really crazy expensive. But second-hand stuff is still pretty expensive, but sometimes you get lucky. And like if you want to... Yeah, sometimes you get really, really lucky. But if you like records, yeah, of course, it's excellent here. Or you go into these stores that sell tubes and there's like, you know, thousands and thousands. But they can be, yeah. Sometimes you get lucky and sometimes not. Yeah, earphone may well have more than 1,000 different headphones and earphones on display. Probably. What do I think of the new Audio GD? Well, I'm going to tell you about that when I review this. It's nice. It's really, really nice. R2IDACs sound really nice, but they're not the most dead neutral, but they sound really, really nice to listen with. So they're probably going to be better than the PCM 1704 UK versions. So but I didn't have them both here to compare. Wait for this to go, if you want the comparison, wait for this to go to DAC Ladder. When I eventually get around to doing all this, I'll send it over to him, and he will write up comparisons on Headfi, I'm sure. Because he has the older one. He bought like the last Singularity unit before this came out, and he kind of doesn't want to spend another $2,500 on a DAC. So I said, I'll just send this one. I asked Kingware, I said, can I send this over? And he goes, yes. And do you have a vinyl system? No, I refuse to get back into vinyl. I did, my father did, and I had a nice one with the good old SME tone arm with a model which I forgot, the famous one. A Thorens with a nice suspended platform. But I sold it. No, I refuse to. It takes up too much space, it's too much hassle. No, I just can't be bothered. It would just, I mean, I have, half the reason I'm giving away stuff is because I just have too much crap here. I mean, look at this place. I mean, this is just not even trying. You get the idea. Any experience with Audio GD power amps? Yeah, well, they work pretty well as far as I know. But only not personally, but I've seen other people say. I mean, they're going to be pretty much the same thing. They're going to be dead neutral, and they're going to be kind of get out of the way of the music and fairly straightforward in that way, uncolored. That's another thing. I keep thinking about power amps, and I'm thinking, do I really want to try and get a speaker setup going in here? Now, oh, okay, a JBL speaker. I see. Donald North Audio. Yes, I'd really have to check out his gear again. Everyone who's tried his stuff has said it's amazing. Japanese rating systems on used gear over the game of impressing the customer. US is rating his system rip off the customer. Different attitude. Okay, so I am just about done. I actually have to go and do some other stuff. I actually have to go and work. So, should I buy another metal GZ34 and future-proof myself? That's exactly what I did. I bought two GZ34s, which you can't see out of here, because in case one died. Considering I paid a reasonable price for them, not a bad choice. Have you reviewed the Solaris? Not yet. I need to get stacks in here. It needs stacks, and yeah. Anyway, long story. I want to get the whole stacks and I want to get Mr. Speakers in here and do the whole lot, but I don't expect it's going to do too greatly with stacks. But the Solaris it's pretty good, but it's kind of hard challenged at €5,000. I'll help you clear up some space. Please send me the Focal Utopias. Ha ha ha. No. Do you have any hobbies beside audio? Photography? Not so much, but yeah, it's just mainly audio, and photography and computers was a kind of hobby/work. So that's going to be it for me. Very last questions before I go and before my voice dies, which is going to be crap because my work involves speaking. But, you know, I don't think I've showed off it. I mean, you've seen the photos on my videos. Well, that's me. That's my photography. It's very, very kludgy, but I have half-decent photography skills. Extremely kludgy. I should do a video on how badly I kludge taking photographs of stuff. You'd probably be rather shocked at how seriously I kludge taking photographs. If you have anything that's large, plastic and white, and then your walls are are off-white, and you have a camera and a flash, that's 99% of what you need, or you just have a light box to take decent photography of stuff. It's ridiculous how easy it is to photograph stuff if you just have a little bit of creativity and an experiment. So, if that's all good, is your giveaway only for Patreons? Yes, it's patrons. It's only for patrons. Yes. I mean, fair enough. I mean, people are going to send me a couple of bucks a month or whatever. It's fair enough that they get something back for it, and why not give away stuff? I'll have to. Yes, photography. Yes, will be fun to talk about. I should get Nathan in here. Shigzao. He's a serious photographer, and we should do a multi thing. Maybe if I can do a live cast with him. He's a hilarious guy. If you've ever seen him, he's on SoundCloud. You can listen to him interviewing people. A very, very funny guy. And we did some podcasts once, which we dragged on for 2 hours. We had so much crap to talk about. Okay, so yeah, actually I should get Nathan in. Long overdue to do that. So thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for support from patrons. And yeah, if you have any suggestions or ideas, please let me know. Probably the best place to do that is just send me a message to my headphone and earphone reviews site, which I'm just going to jump up here and pop it in the video. My videos come out before the written reviews, but there are written reviews there too. I've got Bruco. No, I think I didn't announce. Bruco from Headfi is now posting on my site as well. He's joined me in doing that, and mainly so he can just I don't editorialize any of his stuff. He just posts what he wants to do, his reviews, and put them up. So if you did like his reviews on Headfi, he's going to be posting them here now. And yes, and that's probably the main one. It's interesting because he and I disagree on some things a little bit, and so to have a different perspective, I always like having there. So to have his way of thinking on the site is actually good. So something different. Use Livecast for Hangouts. I'll try that. So anyway, yeah, do check out the site, and most of what I review on video should be in there, mostly written up the same on the site. So if you want to quote something I say, it's probably easier to do that. You should get someone who reviews flagship IEMs. Well, I'm sort of doing that, but yeah, maybe I should. If I have time, I'll try and review some more flagship IEMs. Okay, so that's all for me for now. And once again, thanks for watching. And well, yeah, I'll see you guys online next time. I'll just leave this open for a couple of more minutes so that anyone want any more chat messages want to post in there before I shut it down.